It's not to be like the world, and not to be like the great majority of American Christians, but to be like Jesus Christ. I don't know why you're clapping. I'm talking about you.
What's wrong with you people? I'm serious.
You can't say amen, you ought to say ouch.
Hello, humblebees. Welcome to Tulips and Honey.
Hi, humblebees. Welcome back to Tulips and Honey. I am your host, Lauren, and today I'm going to be joined by a very special guest. I want to welcome to the show Alan from The Polite Leader, his YouTube channel. If you have not already checked it out, there is a link to it in the descriptions below. Brother, thank you so much for joining me. It is such a joy to get the chance to discuss all of the work that you are doing on YouTube right now, exposing the truth and also promoting good, solid teachers. So thank you, brother. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Oh my goodness, the honor is all mine. I'm super excited to talk about this. This is one of my favorite topics, actually, to get to discuss content creation and stuff with people who do this. And it's always like, I don't know, like a weird, dorky thing for me, like to hear about the background scenes and stuff. So if I get too excited, just know that that's normal. And that's just like how I always am. So
well, I've seen several of your podcasts, so you're always awesome. So
so you already know. Okay, you're prepared. You're good. Yeah. You won't be super surprised. Okay.
No, not too surprised.
Oh, good. Well, oh my goodness, it's really it's crazy to hear that you've heard any of my podcasts. So thank you. That was really cool to hear.
It's always the opposite for me, because when someone invites me on their podcast, I'm like, who am I? You know?
Yeah, exactly. I know, that's a weird thing, isn't it? I really, whenever I started podcasting, I didn't think anybody would ever see my podcast. It was really for the blog. And so I just thought this would be something cool for my readers to get to hear a little bit extra. And so when people are like, hey, my church member told me, I'm like, but how? How did that happen? I don't understand. Word of mouth is a cool thing, but your channel, I know, has been a tremendous blessing to me. And a lot of my listeners have also likewise said that they have really appreciated your work. And actually, I mentioned our interview on a live thing that I did last Friday, and I had people in the comment sections even saying, I love that channel. So I'm really excited to get to share a lot about like your background scenes and the things that you do with the listeners. But before we get started with all of that, would it be okay if you started by sharing your testimony with the listeners? Just something I like to do to start off with guests, give people the opportunity to hear about how God graciously saved you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, my testimony story is not all that interesting because I have a testimony story that's similar to the late, great Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones, in that my salvation story is kind of progressive. I can remember being in a Southern Baptist church when I was a young child, like 7 or 8 years old, and then that really being the first time that the cross and what Jesus has done for us, like as my little child's mind, that was explained to me for the first time. And I remember believing it at that point in time. I remember never not believing it. But as I grew more mature and older, I recognized that there was a difference between being a nominal Christian and being someone who the gospel has actually penetrated into their heart. And so there were spots in my time where I would get really interested in theology and read the Bible for like stretches of months and months and months, and really be into the Bible and be into prayer, and then fall back into a sinful lifestyle where I was just like kind of watching movies and being really influenced by the secular world. So I think it just sort of, I don't have a magical light bulb moment, unfortunately. It was just more progressive in the fact that the gospel was always around me my entire life, whether it was through family or through church. So maybe the last several years I've been more consistent in my Christian faith, I would say.
Oh, that's great. This is why I love this question, because there's such a breadth of difference between the way that God saves each and every one of his children. And I feel like I'm constantly, I probably say this every single time, but I do always get these messages or emails from listeners that say, I don't have a testimony like yours. Am I really saved? Because I don't have that, aha moment. I was a false convert for so long that there was a clear distinction between my idolatry and whenever I was saved. And so I love to ask this question so that listeners can see that there are different ways and means with which God saves. And it should be very encouraging to all the other parents. I know it's encouraging to me. My daughter's 9. And so to hear that is very encouraging because she's heard the gospel since she was 4. That's whenever I got saved was when she was 4. So it's encouraging for me to hear that. And hopefully it'll be encouraging for the listeners too, because that's definitely the testimony I want my daughter to I don't ever want to hear her say, I was doing drugs and then I realized I was, sinful. So that is such a blessing, brother. I really appreciate you sharing that. And also mentioning Martin Lloyd-Jones, because that's one of my favorites. How cool is it that we get to listen to him still?
It's amazing. And they've fixed some of the poor audio that was in the original sermon, so you can hear it more crisply at high definition now. But yeah, back to what you said. I remember reading Spurgeon's biography, Volume 1, and he had this amazing existential moment. I just like to call it the light bulb moment. It's a word I developed over time. And I was like, I've never experienced that. Am I doing something wrong? Is this unreal? But then when you hear other saints like John MacArthur and Lloyd-Jones talk about it as well, then you don't feel so alone, I guess.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Especially whenever you hear it from a Martin Lloyd-Jones where his story is finished. So we already know that God completed that good work in him. So you can see that throughout his life, even though his testimony wasn't that aha light bulb moment, God still graciously saved him and worked through his life, and we're still getting to hear it. So I do think that is something that really is, I don't think it's missing necessarily in Christian culture. I just think that people enjoy the more extreme testimonies, and so they probably get shared around a lot more. I think Jeff Durbin's testimony had me in tears, right? Very few people are going to hear that and not be moved. But really, the miraculous effort of God saving somebody at a young age and then sanctifying them through the years. I just interviewed the guys from Church History Matters, and one of them had a hot light bulb moment, and the other one actually had a testimony quite similar to yours. And I remember as he was talking, thinking about how difficult it would be to spend that much time being sanctified through your teen years, even to be sanctified. I mean, when I was a teenager, I just did whatever I wanted and I was a horrible heathen. But God had such a longer period of time to be sanctifying you that it's actually very miraculous and very beautiful to hear that God did that work in you and was so patient throughout that time frame, because little children and little preteens can sometimes be kind of difficult. So God chose to have extra grace on you as a child. So it's really beautiful. I love that question. I love getting to talk to people about their testimonies. So really appreciate you sharing that. But the meat of what we're going to be talking about today is actually how cool your YouTube channel is, because it is super cool. So I was wondering, your name, or actually, I guess before we talk about your name, what is it that actually motivated you to start a YouTube channel and focus on the topics that you focus on? Because there's a bit of a broad range. You kind of talk about what's happening in the news and some of the false teachers and stuff. So what was your motivation behind that?
Yeah, so the one thing I wanted to do when I started my YouTube channel was to make a channel that wasn't horrible to people. It's if I wanted to watch it, then I thought maybe other people would want to watch it too. Right. So I spent a lot of time before I started my YouTube channel watching other YouTubers, and they weren't necessarily Christians. They were just YouTubers who were had good content. It was fast, it was quick, it kept you engaged. So I took a month out studying that, first of all. And then I wanted a name that wasn't taken, obviously. So it's and stood out. So there's the movie called The Purge.
Oh yeah.
And the lead villain in it, actually, is, ironically enough, is he didn't really have a name in the movie, so they just gave him the name Polite Leader. And so I asked my nephew, who's pretty tech savvy, who was helping me set up my YouTube channel at the time, is that name taken? And he's like, no. I was like, okay, let's go with that. That sounds pretty cool. And there was a second reason for it too, is because I always struggled with anger in my teen years and in my college years and even in my young adult years, and I was never really able to get a lot of control over it at certain points in time. It cost me some relationships and friendships. And so I wanted to use a name that was going to make sure that I didn't fall prey to that old sin over and over again. So that kind of keeps me in check. And people always comment, say, even when I am polite sometimes, again, that's up to the audience to determine whether I am or not. But even when I'm criticizing somebody they like, I say, you're not polite at all, sir. So I was like, okay, I picked the right name.
There you go. Yeah, that's great accountability too. I love that. I know that my listeners are probably tired of me beating this drum, but it's been the really the heartbeat behind this this program since the very beginning is to try to encourage believers to behave themselves on social media, because there's so many that'll just hop online and they don't have any accountability from their leaders or their pastors or their elders, and they're kind of snarky, like just in general. And then whenever they get really upset, they'll get quite ugly. And so I love the encouragement towards that, and the honesty that you show, saying like we're all struggling with this, because it is a struggle, especially whenever you get people saying things like that. Whenever you're trying so hard to provide this great content, and there's always somebody that's going to not like it. I know we did at the beginning of the year, at the end of 2019, and the beginning of 2020, like 5 years ago, at the beginning of 2020, we had a fun game that we were playing. It was called Name That Heretic. And we would post a quote, and our listeners had to guess which heretic said it. And we couldn't believe the amount of hate mail that we received over that game. And we were even giving away prizes and gift cards and stuff. So we didn't think we'd get any pushback.
That's funny.
We switched it after that to make a new game. We said, name that theologian. And surprisingly enough, we got zero pushback about the positive side of, naming good, solid stuff. So it's difficult whenever you're constantly having to answer the same exact accusation to stay patient. So how do you respond to that? Like, is there encouragement or ways that you've learned to deal with this? Because it can be frustrating to have to repeat yourself. Do you copy and paste, or are you like, okay, I'm going to pray for 24 hours and then I'll come back to that? How do you handle that kind of stuff? And do you even get a lot of hate mail or messages and stuff?
I don't get a lot of hate mail. Most of the people who email me on my Gmail account are usually supportive and always have words of encouragement. Sometimes they'll have a question, but they're usually cordial. People on Instagram are the same. When they message me on Instagram, they're usually very nice and kind. The hate comments are always on the YouTube channel itself. And I've developed this new strategy. I would say hello if they leave their name or whatever. It's like John or Jane or whatever. Hi, Jane. Thank you for your comment. And that sort of, I think, calms the mood down, especially if it's really, really angry comment where they've actually called me the devil or an apostle of Satan or something like that. And then that calms me down, first of all, because, like I said, I have a history of having a short fuse. And then I could say, well, here's where I disagree with you on. And sometimes, I don't say a lot of times, but sometimes that works and it does bring them down and they're like, oh, well, thank you so much for responding to my comment. Once in a while they get, I'm sorry, I was so short with you or impolite. And that sometimes helps, but that's the strategy I've developed over the years.
That's a good strategy. Yeah, it's the scriptural thing about the soft words turning away the angry. I've had that similar situation where somebody says, you know what, I'm going to delete my comment. I'm sorry, it was quite rude. And that's very encouraging to me. Even if we walk away and we still disagree, it's encouraging to see people that are willing to be humble about things like that. The devil thing, though, that's weird. I got called the Antichrist. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't expecting it. I really was not expecting it. I'm not sure where that idea comes from, or because I was in the Word of Faith for 10 years and I never thought, well, there's an Antichrist. So I'm not sure where that comment comes from.
Well, I think
interesting.
Well, for me specifically, it's my entire group, people come on and say Calvinism is a heresy or Calvinists are demonic and things like that. And we've taken a lot of abuse over the years. Sometimes we've deserved it, other times we haven't. So there are those caged Calvinists out there. They are acting more appropriately. But I think that just in general, when you receive a hate comment, one person this last week reached out to me on Instagram and said, I made a comment years ago on your channel, and now I've come to true Christian faith and gotten away from the Word of Faith movement. Wow. So you never really know what's going to happen, because if you respond in anger and vitriol, and that turns them away from Christ, that's on you. But if you respond in a kind, gentle, and gracious manner, you never know how the Spirit is going to work in the heart of the individual, even though there's a stranger just writing a comment on your YouTube channel.
Oh, that is such a great testimony. I love that, to hear that kind of thing from, YouTube can be an ugly place too. It's kind of like video Twitter, because there's quite a lot of hate that happens over there on YouTube. I understand why so many people turn their comments off, but that right there is a reason to not turn your comment off, to really just engage with these people. no one engaged with me in the word of faith for over a decade. And then all of a sudden one guy sent me a Paul Washer clip, and that was like all it took. Right. So, I mean, you really do never know. So that's really encouraging to hear. The word of faith is such a difficult, it's a difficult place to get out of, because you're not being exposed to any other belief system as you're in there. Like, I had no idea that Calvinism existed. I didn't know that Reformed faith existed. I didn't know anything about any of that. All I knew was that somebody sent me a Paul Washer sermon. And so as I'm enjoying Paul Washer and I'm listening to all these other sermons and, John MacArthur and stuff, I still had no idea. And then I saw somebody say something like that. Calvinism is, it's a devil. And I was like, Calvinism? I have friends that say they're Calvinists. I need to look into that, because if they're believing something false, I want to help them. So I read the Institutes, right? Like, get it from the horse's mouth. And by the end of the Institutes, I was like, this is biblical. I'm Reformed. This gal's a Calvinist now. So
That's awesome.
it is a process for sure to get from A to B. Learning about the Reformed stuff there's a lot of words, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, and I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding, because, like you said, I think that's sort of the magic move. Read Calvin, read R.C. Sproul, read Reformed theologians and Reformed scholars, and once you read them, because a lot of people who make the criticism are going off of secondhand knowledge and secondhand criticism, and they don't actually understand what we truly believe. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people have come on my channel and said, well, you can't do anything about it. God has decided that you're going to go to hell, and that's it. And, R.C. Sproul has brought up the example about God. People think that God is preventing people who want to come into heaven from getting into heaven, and dragging people kicking and screaming into heaven who don't want to go there. And that's not the case at all. If you sit back and just distinguish between God's divine decree and his revealed will, and you allow that, then all those criticisms against Calvinism are essentially just straw men.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's a really good point. And this is something that I love. I'm glad that you said that I love that you do this in your videos, is that you use logic. And that's sort of like a weird thing these days, right? Like, there's such a thing as logic. It's not taught in school. Most people would say there's no such thing as logic, but there is. Logic exists. And you use it in a lot of your videos where you explain and you use the word. So if somebody hasn't studied logic, they might not know straw man is actually a word, a phraseology for learning about the laws of logic. And I love that you incorporate that into your videos, because it's concerning to me how very little logic is used in the Christian faith, where we should be very logical and very thoughtful individuals. In the strawman that I'm constantly hearing about these things, it's very similar to the strawman that we hear about our defense for biblical truth and against word of faith stuff. We hear these strawmen where they're still misunderstanding what we're saying. And that is a lot of it, where they'll say, well, you want to put God in a box, and I'm taking him out of the box, and I'm letting him do whatever he wants. And so there's a lot of that straw man stuff that happens. And you have a broad range of videos, but recently you did a top 10 worst teachers. And so when you got to the end of it, I messaged you and I was like, okay, now that you're done, I'd really like to talk to you about this, because the list is fantastic. I'm going to make sure to link to all 10 of those videos below, just in case people. Yeah, absolutely. I'm thrilled about this. And the one thing that caught my eye, and probably because it affects me personally with family members, is that you did a video on Andrew Womack. And I very rarely see people address Andrew Womack, but coming from the South, he's big down there. Like, I grew up in Texas, and he is like the down home country kind of guy, I guess they think. And he talks their language and he looks like them. And so it's very deceiving. I have family members who have refused to take life-saving medication because he said not to on his program. So I was excited to see you address these guys, particularly Andrew Womack, but you addressed 10 of the worst ones. So can you walk us through, whenever you're doing this, and just before, I'm so sorry, I should have said this already. Before you guys start typing out your little, that's hateful and nasty and just terrible and not very polite, he did do a top 10 best pastors too, okay? He did the positive stuff first. So just hold off on that email until you've actually checked out his channel. Also, just so everybody knows, if you do send me a hate mail, it does get sent directly to my producer, my 2-year-old golden doodle, and she has no opposable thumbs, so she can't answer you. But feel free to still send the hate mail. It will be read by Clementine, my producer. Anyways, So how did you decide on these top 10 worst guys? And while you were recording it, which one was like the one that you learned the most about, that stood out the most to you? And how did you decide Copeland was the absolute worst of the worst? Was it the COVID-19 blowing the
No,
wind of God on people?
no, it was the entire career, really.
Okay.
Well, actually, I have a friend. His name is Andreas, and we were planning on starting our own podcast together. And he actually has he's come out of the Word of Faith movement, so he still has family members that are in it. So I always bounce ideas by him. He's a student at the Master's Seminary. That's where I met him. Yeah, so
neat.
I always bounce ideas off of him, and I was like, "What do you think about this? And what do you think about that?" And he'd be like, "Nah, I wouldn't go with that guy. I would go with this guy." So I restricted it to people who were faithers, and I left out anybody who was maybe even remotely affiliated with the New Apostolic Reformation, because I wanted to do a separate series on that. So that was the first thought process, and some people were critical of it, critical of the list, I should say, because TD Jakes wasn't on the list. And my thinking was, well, I had done 2 videos previously on Jakes, so I wanted to cover some people that I hadn't covered before. So maybe it's not the actual 10 worst. And again, that's just an opinion. Who's worse, who's not. I know you had Justin Peters on, and he said that he thought that Joel Osteen, I think your daughter asked him, it was so awesome.
That's right.
That was so awesome.
I forgot about
And he
that.
said, yeah, that was the coolest. He said that Joel Osteen was the worst. And I can see why he would say that, because he is so popular. I mean, he's very, very famous. But I wanted to kind of go with sort of like a historical thing, who had the most historical impact over the last several years, and that's why Kenneth Copeland and Benny Hinn ended up way at the top. The person that I learned the most about was the person you just mentioned, Andrew Womack. And I'll tell you, I read a book. I read a book or so written by him, and he embraces the absolute most aggressive form of the false prosperity gospel. I mean, he just straight up says it in his book. I was trying to, I always want to open mind. I'm like, no. Justin Peters could be wrong somewhere here, but then it always ends up being even worse than what he says.
Yeah.
I was like, why, And he literally says it's always God's desire for you to be healed. And so when you go to texts like Galatians, Paul's, some theologians think it's an eye ailment. When you go to texts about when Paul left Trophimus behind ill, he just reinterprets it so that it fits into his system. It doesn't matter what the biblical writer is saying. All that matters is his system. And, I was stunned when I was reading his book. I forgot the title of the book off the top of my head. Can't remember it. But he meets a guy whose daughter is incredibly sick, and he shakes him. Literally, he says he shakes him and says, "Don't you want your daughter to get better? Why don't you have enough faith to believe that she's going to get better?" And my jaw just dropped when I was reading that. I was like, this man claims to be a Christian leader, a man of God, and he is uttering the most wicked blasphemies, and of course, in that case, I think it ends up being a happy story or something like that, happy ending. But in reality, a person reading that, who's a big fan of Andrew Womack and whose daughter is actually sick, might begin to think, oh, well, I don't, it always develops this class of regular Christians and super Christians.
Yep.
And they would start thinking, well, I'm not a super Christian. There must be something wrong with me. It's like this invincible apologetic. So he was the one I learned the most about. In terms of formulating the list, it was just that I wanted to cover a few guys I hadn't covered before. And I wanted to make sure Copeland was on the top of the list because of all the whole, what does Justin Peters say? He says he has made some of the most blood-curdling, blasphemous statements of any person he's ever studied. And he's just a dark individual in general. I think most people are aware of the Inside Edition reporter who went up to him and he was like, "Don't you say that?" It was kind of frightening. It was kind of like gives you the creeps.
It does. That. I wouldn't let Kaylee watch it. My daughter wanted to see it. She was like, "Mom, what are you guys watching?" And I was like, "You don't want to see this, baby. It will give you nightmares." Like, I'll insert it. I'll insert it right here so you guys can have nightmares with us. It's really creepy. It is.
Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and power.
It was super creepy. And I felt bad for that poor little lady that was talking to him because she looked kind of tiny and like maybe she was, she probably wasn't there by herself. But if I'm a bodyguard at that point, honestly, and I'm with her, I probably would have stepped between the two of them because it was kind of creepy how he did that. But
I do wonder what was going through her mind when that happened,
Right.
Just like,
she stayed so calm. She stayed so calm. I would have been like, "Where's my whistle? I'm going to blow my whistle. I can't believe how calm she stayed.
Yeah,
Seriously,
she
but
was really professional.
yeah, it's impressive, really, that she was able to stay that calm. But I mean, I'd love for somebody to get to talk to her about that moment and see what she thinks, since that was he does have a tendency to go viral, and I think about that with these guys like
Stephen
Stephen
Furtick. Oh, okay, yeah, Stephen Furtick.
They say the weirdest things and they go viral, and I'm like, somebody at his church really doesn't love him, because they just let him post these things and then they go viral. So I'm like, where is the people there that love this man enough to not let him post these things? Like somebody should have said, Copeland brother, no, you shouldn't be doing that. So
Yeah.
just kind of calm down. But nobody did, and I guess he just doesn't. I don't know. Maybe doesn't realize how creepy it was. But this list, I think, is really helpful. I'm thankful that you brought up the Andrew Womack thing, because actually one of the things that we see a lot with our family members that enjoy watching him and listening to him is that idea that they just don't have enough faith to get well. And so when they go off of their medication or they refuse to go to the doctor, one in particular was very injured and elderly and needed to have surgery to fix the things that happened while they were injured, and they refused to do it, and they're still suffering the consequences right now. But the idea was that they were going to just be very faithful. And honestly, really what it actually boils down to is you're just lying. You're just saying, I'm not in pain, when you actually are in pain, and we're not supposed to lie. That's actually one of the commandments. It's a big deal. But he does have that effect on people because he is so extreme. I've heard him say that, your child died because you didn't have enough faith. It wasn't God wanting your child to die. It was because you didn't have faith. I'm sorry for you that you had to read so many of these people's books
I watch their videos too,
and watch their
and their
videos.
presentations. It's an invincible. I call it an invincible apologetic, because even if you're not a Christian, if you look across the world as you walk through life, you see that there are people who get sick, people who get really sick, people who are in tremendous pain. So when the prosperity theology is in the hands of the word of faithers, you obviously, these questions come up. Why don't people get better who desire to get better? Why don't people get healed who desire to get healed? Well, it's not the word of faith teacher's fault, because he has tremendous faith or she has tremendous faith, and it's definitely not God's fault. So who's left? It's the believer. They're the ones who are told your faith is just not strong enough. There are these laws out there in the universe that you just haven't learned to tap into. And even if the teacher himself, like Copeland's made a lot of false prophecies.
Sure.
So when they make false prophecies, they would just say, well, everybody's fallible. Everybody can make a mistake. So you really can't respond meaningfully to them against an apologetic like that. It's just so irrational.
Yeah, there really is no way to logically think through the things that they're saying, because if at any point you can say, yeah, but magic, like that's really the be all end all. Yeah, but it works because it just is magical. That's really like Disneyland stuff and not grown up people stuff. So it does make it difficult to have those kind of conversations.
It's sort of like the Roman Catholic apologetic about the bodily assumption of Mary, right?
Right.
There isn't a shred of evidence that for the first 400 years, Jesus and New Testament writers, any Christian writer for the first 400 years, even knew about, believed, and taught the bodily assumption of Mary. And I heard one Roman Catholic apologist, his defense was, well, it was so popular that it was never mentioned. And so when you have a defense like that, it's a little hard to engage in a critical debate or dialogue with someone.
Yeah, you just really want to believe it. So you do. You just really, 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 really want to believe it. So it's true. And even though you weren't there and there's no evidence, it's true. And don't tell me that it's not. Yeah, that is actually one of the things that's very frustrating as a believer, to see the image that this portrays Christians as. So whenever I talk to atheists or theists or anything other than, like genuine believers, I tend to get that sort of like vibe from them where they're just waiting for me to say something dumb, like they're just like, okay, well, I'm going to shoot out this argument and you're going to say back to me, yeah, but Jesus. So there is that image, I think, of believers out there. And I love your channel is out there really breaking up that image and helping other people learn how to also address these issues. I heard you the other day on your question and answer ones where you said, I'm a card-carrying young earth creationist.
Oh,
and I thought that was so great. We need cards. We need that.
We do. Although I recently went on the Answers in Genesis website, and I learned that that's not actually the appropriate term. We are supposed to refer to ourselves as biblical creationists.
Ah,
It's
okay,
like
I like
young Earth
that.
is just one aspect of what we believe. We're actually biblical creations. Oh, okay,
Ah,
cool.
I like that better.
There's always something new to learn.
Yeah, I'm gonna make us cards and I'm gonna send you one. It's
Oh,
gonna say
awesome! I can't
biblical
wait to get
creation.
it. I love being a young Earther. It's so
I
awesome.
do too. I can understand why they made that distinction because I was surprised to learn recently that there is actually a movement within the scientific community of atheists who no longer believe that the universe is millions or billions of years old, and they're actually saying maybe 10 to 20,000, and they're called catastrophists. And they believe that catastrophism, like catastrophism, that's not a word, catastrophes.
Catastrophism.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Actually, is how things change, sort of like a global flood.
Well, you made a
And
very insightful comment on one of your podcasts. You said young Earth creationism. So what? You can be a Jew and be a young Earth creationist, a Muslim. You can even be an atheist. Obviously, they wouldn't say the Earth is as young as we would, 6,000 years, but
right,
they like millions of years at least. Um, and you could still not know Jesus. You could still be
right,
unregenerate. It's not, it's not the standard. I mean, it helps. It
right.
certainly helps. It's an apologetical tool that you can use to have a conversation with someone. But at the end of the day, it is the transforming power of the Holy Spirit and your embracing of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that is so helpful because I actually learned about creationism before I even was a Christian, and so I mean, I thought I was a Christian. I was a false convert, but it was helpful to me, I think, to understand how to address this with other people, to actually have learned about those things first. And I love science and I love dinosaurs and I love all that stuff. And so when I became a genuine Christian, I look back and realized all of that information never actually, it never changed my hardened heart. I was still, idolatrous and sinful, and I didn't want the genuine. It's not that I didn't have the Bible right in front of me, but I didn't want to hear what it had to say. I wanted to hear what Kenneth Copeland had to say. So it's really, really cool. I love talking about those things, but you're right. There is definitely a need for the gospel, even when we're dealing with that. But I think that the cool part about having a channel, a YouTube channel or a podcast, things like that. And I'm really excited to hear that you're going to have a podcast because that was going to be a question that I sort of slipped in there at the end. Is that we get to discuss this wide range of topics. So when you're planning future episodes and you're mulling through all of these ideas, what is it that particularly strikes you as a need for something on YouTube? Because we don't want to be an echo chamber, right? We don't want everybody to be doing the same exact things, and of course we're all reaching our own audience. So it's important that we continue to tell the truth regardless. But what exactly is it that you like about creating this content and picking certain topics for YouTube?
Well, I think that it helps people. I think that's the number one thing for me. Just recently, somebody had stated that I introduced them to John MacArthur.
Oh,
Other
neat.
people, yeah, I know. It's just like, wow, me? I just,
Right.
I think I would think that everybody already knows who John MacArthur is, but that's not
Right.
the case. And
Right.
so when I hear comments like that, it's just awesome. That's like I'm introducing you to, whether it's Jeff Durbin or James White or Justin Peters or whoever I'm pointing you to, because I always think of Ignatius, Paul and Peter, they were apostles. I am not. Justin Peters, John MacArthur, they are great men of God. I am not. I just want to point you to them. So that's
Yeah.
probably the first thing that people start to understand what the true gospel is when I point them in the direction of men like that. That's helpful. I try to point them to apologists because sometimes people are struggling through some intellectual challenges, so that helps them
Sure.
out as well. I think that my channel, I want it to be, it's different because it's what Professor Baugh at Westminster's Theological Seminary described Calvin as. His work had lucid brevity. So I try to
Oh,
have
yeah.
lucid brevity in my videos. They're like 5 to 10 minutes long.
Mhm.
I try to pack in as much as I can there in that short amount of time. And so some people, that's a little bit easier for them to digest and maybe just use that as sort of like an introduction before they watch something that's maybe an hour and a half long. So
Sure.
I think that's sort of how my channel is a little bit unique.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, it is. I love what you're doing with your channel. It is very unique. I think that sometimes we have, especially I'm a homeschooling mom, and so I have like sometimes 5 to 10 minutes where I can learn something in this short amount of time. I don't maybe have 2 hours to do like a full on Chris Roseborough or Justin Peters video. So that's really really helpful, especially because there is constantly I'm hearing from people there's no good stuff to watch. So I have to watch the stuff that's junk on TV. I'm like, well, there's great stuff. There's great stuff out there. There's great content out there that's educational, edifying, entertaining, and you do all of those things in your short videos where you're captivating and you're also educating. And that's something that I've always, even before I was a believer, if I was going to watch something, I wanted to learn something, right? So if it was going to be television, can it at least be like, I don't know, Nature Channel or History Channel or something? I wanted to at least learn something. And I don't know, maybe that's just my weird ADHD brain, but I constantly have to be doing more than one thing at a time. So it's helpful for us moms, us housewives and homeschooling moms to have those shorter lessons where we can learn about people. I'm curious what you have, you mentioned the podcast. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, and what you have coming up. You said an NAR list. Are you having to read their books?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I'm going to pray for you.
I'll be honest with you. It's easier to read NAR and Word of Faithers for me than it is to read progressive Christians.
Ooh,
because when you read them, it's like, oh, these are basically just agnostics who are interested in the Bible. They use a lot of the same arguments that atheists do. But in terms of the podcast is going to be sort of a tag team podcast with myself and my friend Andreas, and we're going to try to. Again, we're gonna probably title it "Polite and Reformed," just as a heads up.
Nice. I love that. Yeah. Oh, that is so cool.
And that'll again keep us in check and make it very, very ironic and very easier to listen to, because sometimes things can get emotional when you're discussing something that is controversial, I would say, where there are different opinions, especially the charismatic and cessationist debate. So we're going to try to do it in as a kind and gracious and gentle fashion as we can, and also try to as accurately represent the other side as we possibly can, because sometimes they accuse us of the same thing, straw manning them and misrepresenting them. So we're going to try to probably open with a podcast that discusses how we can communicate effectively with charismatics, some of whom are heretical and some of whom are our brothers and sisters in the Lord, and how we can, because there's certain barriers that you have to overcome. And he knows a lot about that subject, so I'm going to, give the ball to him in that opening podcast. And then after that, I would like to go over some of the key texts that the Word of Faithers and the prosperity gospel teachers misuse, I should say, twist and turn to. Yeah, and try to give the appropriate exegesis for those texts. So I'd like to focus on that. But we're planning on doing a wide range, talking about Calvinism and Arminianism, and maybe analyzing some of progressive Christianity.
Oh my goodness!
The New Apostolic Reformation provide some origin, history, and background, and then go through the 10 most dangerous, who I think are the most, probably be like a 12 video series.
Oh, cool. Okay. I was excited to hear what you're talking about, that you were going to exegete scripture and stuff. It's because as a woman podcasting, my statistics show that there's a 50-50% listeners, men and women. And so I'm uncomfortable exegeting scripture or teaching it in any way in this platform, even though it's, I'm not church or anything like that. It still makes me uncomfortable. So if I have a topic that's biblical that I want somebody to come on and exegete, I usually bring a brother in Christ on. So I'm excited to hear a podcast that's going to be addressing those scriptures that the Word of Faith uses, because I did a special podcast with my brother in Christ over at the Cave to the Cross Apologetics, and we did a special for his Patreon where we read one of Joyce Meyer's books together, and we addressed each chapter, and every single chapter had a verse being taken out of context. So there's a lot of it out there. It's a lot. So you're going to have plenty of content. Are you going to do any interviews for that in the podcast? Or you're just going to stick with the two of you guys?
Well, I would like to do interviews. I just feel like no one would want to accept an invitation. I would love to have Justin Peters on. I would love to have Alyssa Childers on. I would love to have Phil Johnson on. I don't know how accessible they are. So I just would love to have them on, but it all depends on if they say yes or not.
Oh, they will. I always ask that to YouTubers. When are you going to have a podcast? You going to have a podcast? Can I help you have a podcast? I want you to have a podcast. I bothered Justin Peters about it so much. He finally was like, yes, I'll do a podcast.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that interview recently. That was awesome. I just hope we don't disappoint.
I know. Oh, you won't. You know what? I love the idea of podcasting because it's unique in that you can continue playing on your phone while you're listening. So that's kind of nice. You can drive and listen. So there's a lot of people that listen on their way to work, but I'm excited to hear all of this stuff that you guys got going on, and the NAR thing too. Um, I'm curious as to whether or not when you're dealing with the difference between Word of Faith and NAR, there's a distinction that's important, and if we don't make that distinction, a lot of times the people who are Word of Faith but not NAR will be very offended. They're not going to really listen to your biblical criticism because they're going to just say, well, I'm not NAR and you need to know the difference and things like that. So how do you, whenever you're dealing with that, what are the distinctions that you give, and how can you help us if we're dealing with a Word of Faither that's not connected with the NAR? How can we better address that topic?
Well, I don't think most of them would even identify. The ones that we would consider to be NAR would identify as being the New Apostolic Reformation. There's a lot of people that say that that's not a good term, that it doesn't exist. I will leave them nameless, but but it does exist. It's a term that was coined by Peter Wagner. The distinctions are specifically the Seven Mountain Mandate and the fact that there's a continuation of apostles today, and there are groups that believe that. So that's one way that you can make that distinction. I don't necessarily think that Joel Osteen would consider himself to be a modern day apostle, so you wouldn't want to lump him together with the NAR. So that's one way to make that distinction. But you do have to be careful because there isn't like a headquarters in Washington, D.C. or New York City called the New Apostolic Reformation Headquarters.
Right.
It's a loose confederation, but they do share a common viewpoint, and they do share common goals.
Yeah, that's really helpful. There's a new apostolic church down the street from me. And so I'm like, every time somebody says that's not a real thing, and I'm like, well, there's a real church called it right down the street from me. And down the street from that church is a church that's just called the Word of Faith Church. So these are real things because I see them. They exist on my street.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with negative connotation. Like if you call someone a liberal Christian, if you call them a liberal, they might think, oh, well, that's a pejorative. That's a bad word. And even the term progressive now has become a pejorative and a bad word. Some people like Tony Campolo would be all right with it. Other people will be offended at it. So you just have to be careful with who you're talking with, how you use specific terminology, because you don't want to burn an evangelistic bridge there.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with, like you were saying, that one person that said, I left a rude comment years ago, and now I understand. When we consider the fact that these are people who are made in the image of God, that we really want to reach with the gospel, not necessarily just saying, hey, you guys are wrong and we're right, but really wanting to make sure that our hearts are in check. And this isn't on the list, but since we're already here, how do you work on that in your own heart? Because I know that if I get to a point ever where I am getting online to win an argument, I'm going to shut my whole internet down. That's like the last thing that I want to do, is to ever be unloving to an unbeliever, because somebody loved me enough to say, hey, just watch this video and let me know what you think. They didn't say anything rude. They didn't, disagree with what I was posting, and I was posting Joyce Meyer stuff and Creflo Dollar stuff. And so they didn't aggressively attack anything that I believed. They simply said, I would love to hear your thoughts about this. And so I remember that whenever somebody is posting stuff that's kind of, agitating me, or things that, and I'm like, gosh, people should all know that this is a false teacher by now. I always have to take a step back and say, what is the purpose of why I'm going to argue here? So what do you do? How do you keep yourself in check for that, to make sure that you're never just trying to win an argument? And is that something that is even difficult for you?
It's always difficult for all of us, I think, because we want people to be delivered from false teaching and to embrace the true gospel of Jesus Christ. And sometimes when people say things that are attacking your favorite teacher or attacking you personally, you might take it personally when you really shouldn't. You should be focused upon remembering that they are, like you said, they are image bearers, and that the word should always be spoken in truth and love. I think that one thing that helps is listening to their side and trying to accurately represent their side, because at least they'll respect you for that, instead of coming up with arguments which they have not made. I think that the one thing to remember is the difference between like an interaction we're having right now, where you can see me, I can see you, we're having an actual verbal dialogue, versus social media. You can't tell tone on social media. You might think that you know tone, but they might be like writing a really nasty comment and be smiling about it, or they might be really writing what you think is a nasty comment, but they're very, very sincere about it. or they
Right.
could just be, trolling you. So you don't really know what the tone is behind their comment. And that's one of the drawbacks and one of the things that negative aspects about social media. You can't tell tone when someone types a comment. And obviously if they call you like really, really nasty names or using profanity, then you know. But other times you may not know. I know that I have been perfect on social media, of course, and I've responded in a short fashion when I should not have. I should have been more patient. And then the other person was like, "No, no, I didn't even mean it that way." And so I was
Right.
like, "Oh, okay, that really drew me back a little bit."
Yeah.
So just remember that you are speaking to a person who's a fellow image bearer. And if they are believing in a false teacher, your desire is not to destroy that false teacher and everything that they represent, which, of course, that's what we want to do. They should be silenced, but is to communicate Christian truth in love to that individual and then let the Spirit do the rest. I mean, that's one of the things I love about being reformed. We are to speak the truth in love and then allow the Spirit to work in that person's heart
Yeah.
and just leave it at that.
Oh, that's such a great encouragement. I think that it's important to really focus in on why we're doing it and what we're doing. Like you mentioned, the tone of voice. It's surprising to me. I think actually, whenever I see people respond differently to the exact same statement, you see these people, they're all from different places, and it as a travel, like, we travel for my husband's work. Obviously right now we're not allowed to go anywhere, but ordinarily we wouldn't be in the same city for longer than like 3 to 6 months. We've been here for almost a year now, but we travel in all over the country here in the United States. I know I have listeners from multiple other countries, but here in America, you can go from one state to the next and you can be saying the exact same sentence and it'll mean something totally different to the people that you're talking to, because words change in different areas and tones of voices change. The people here in North Dakota, they're incredibly thoughtful and sweet and kind and very, very, very just patient. And it's not like that down south. Like, if somebody down south says bless your heart, they're really not being nice. That's actually not a thoughtful thing. They're teasing you. So it's a difference from place to place, and that comes into play. People are using phraseologies that mean different things, and I think that's going to happen whether regardless of you trying really hard or not. It's gonna be a thing where you have to sort of be patient with one another and try to understand. I love what you said about really listening to what the person believes, because as a word of faither, I don't remember ever meeting a person that believed the exact same way as I did whenever I was lost. So even the people in the word of faith are they disagree on a large range of things. And you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation how there are charismatics out there that are believers. There are reformed charismatics out there, so that's a thing that exists. So we need to be careful about assumption. So when you're dealing with somebody, they're aggressive, they're cursing, or they're I guess I should be more specific, because I have received nice messages with curse words in them, and the person just didn't. They weren't saved, and they were being nice. They were asking me for biblical advice or help, and I was happy to point them to a man like Justin Peters that could help them. But they were using foul language. So if they are using foul language in a derogatory way, if they're being really aggressive, do you continue with that conversation, or how do you handle that behind the scenes? Is that something that you're comfortable continuing a conversation with that, or do you just end it right there?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me. I grew up in Los Angeles, so people are using foul language all the time, and like you said, it's not always something that's designed to be hateful or spiteful. It's just colloquial speech.
Mhm.
It's vulgar and it's inappropriate. We should never use it as Christians. But that wouldn't stop me from continuing the conversation with them. But with my YouTube channel, the way it's set up now, and I didn't even do anything. If someone uses profanity, it automatically goes to spam. So I don't really
Yeah,
even see any comments that have profanity in them because YouTube's sending them automatically to spam. You get
it's
them
kind of
once in a
nice.
while. Yeah, it is nice.
Yeah.
It's I never have to see it. See no evil,
Yeah.
hear no evil. So, but once in a while they'll slip through where an F word or something like that will be in the comments. Generally speaking, it's atheists, but it really surprises me when it's people who are self-professing Christians. It does throw me aback a little
Right.
bit when they use that
Yeah.
kind of language. But no, I right now I just don't have time to respond to all the comments. When my channel was a little bit smaller, I was able to. I tried to respond to when I started my channel. I tried to respond to every single comment because that was one of the things that some popular YouTubers recommended when your channel is starting out. If you want your channel to grow, that will help you out. Obviously, I can't do that anymore. So when a negative comment does appear on my channel, I try to avoid responding because I just don't have time, to be honest with you.
I know. I'm always like, does anybody want to volunteer? Do we have any volunteers here? Anybody? No? Okay. Never mind. Nobody's going to get answers to these comments. No, I'm just kidding. I think that's really, really helpful too, just to understand that you have a lot of comments coming in, and that can make it more difficult to respond to everything. So if you're listening and you have sent the polite leader here a comment and he didn't answer, it wasn't because he wasn't being a polite leader. It's because you probably get thousands of them and it's probably overwhelming. But I'm thankful that God is blessing your channel. It's been very helpful to all of us to have you proclaiming the truth. You deal with a lot of different topics, so it's not just about word of faith and things. It's how you addressing Todd White. And actually, your recent video, I think it dropped not yesterday, day before yesterday, Wednesday, about Todd White. I was so disappointed to see that. That was very, very disappointing to see that he right away went back to attacking the American gospel and things of that nature. Do you get discouraged whenever you see things like this, or is it just something that you're like, at least the gospel was proclaimed? Or because as a content creator, you have to address it. Is it discouraging?
Well, it's discouraging in a sense, but recognizing if you've been watching and listening to Todd White for a long time, it wasn't overly surprising to me. I'll be perfectly honest. I did not expect him to do a 180-degree turn and be converted. I know that's sad to say. I didn't say that in the initial video that I made because I didn't want to come off as being a Debbie Downer and this grumpy pessimist. But it didn't surprise me at all that was his reaction. I don't really. I mean, we obviously pray for false leaders and the heretics. We should pray for them. But my concern more so is for the people that are under them, because I don't expect somebody who's living in, $1 million mansions to just give that up on one day and just abandon their empire. I know my friend Doreen Virtue has done that. That was awesome, to see it can happen. But it's unusual for that to happen. So my concern is more so for the people who are under them. If they're looking, generally speaking, when you're looking for your favorite teacher, my video will probably pop up. Somebody had just mentioned that I came up as a third search result when their Stephen Furtick search. So if I come up and I can point them to Justin Peters and Chris Roseborough and other people who have done tremendous work in this area, that's really the goal for me there. But was I surprised that he really went after the American gospel film? I thought that was a little surprising. That was a little surprising that he did that. I was disappointed in it. I was obviously, just like everybody else, hopeful that he had indeed was going to turn around and have a genuine repentance, and that the fact that he was reading Spurgeon and Whitfield and Comfort was the sign of that. But to be 100% honest, I wasn't stunned.
Yeah, right. I think that's what a lot of people. I had messaged a few people like Doreen and some others just to get their feedback about it. And I'm glad you mentioned Doreen, because she's actually been very helpful for me to learn from her, to see the things that she picks up and she addresses, and the things that she leaves alone. So I'm curious what your thought process is on that. Is there a topic where you think, I'm not gonna touch that with a 10-foot pole, or is it, here's a topic, I'm going to address it irregardless, or how do you discern whether or not there's something that you really want to address and things that maybe it's just not your wheelhouse and you're going to let somebody else handle it?
Yeah, if I don't know a lot about the subject matter, then I'm going to be reluctant to do a video on that. A lot of people have come on my channel and asked me to do videos responding to a lot of Roman Catholic YouTubers. And the amount of books that I would have to read, and the lectures I would have to listen to, and the debates I would have to listen to, especially with the subject of Roman Catholicism, because it's just so voluminous. I just don't have time to do that. I have to focus on certain areas. And right now I'm focused on Word of Faith, NAR, and I'm starting to read a little bit more progressive Christian literature. And so those are the three areas that just basically take up all of my time. So it's, generally speaking, if I don't have a lot of knowledge in that area, then I'm going to try to stay away from it and leave it to somebody else who's more well-versed in that particular field.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I had to learn that. And I really learned that really well from Doreen, talking with her, and she'd be like, no, I'm not going to discuss that one. And I'd be like, you know what? me neither. Now I have an excuse because if Doreen's not going to deal with it, then I can say, I have this leader here that is a good example to me because I don't know anything about that topic. Okay, so speaking of your videos, when you are creating this content, they're fast-paced movements, and the way that you've got the imaging and stuff is very, very well done. It's high quality. So what is your editing process like? If you could take us like behind the scenes of what you're doing, like how much time and effort do you put into it, and what sort of software are you using?
So when I started the channel back in 2017, I used iMovie, and I used iMovie for a very long time. Late last year, I started using Movavi, and I've been using Movavi ever since. So those are the two softwares that I've used for creating the content. What I do, and I've changed the format a little bit of my channel now. So stuff that I say now will probably not be relevant going forward, because I think you're talking about what one of my subscribers called my theodocs. So they're like these short little 5 to 10 minute theological documentaries, so to speak, where there's like video clips and then there's stills and things like that. So what I do is I try to, if I'm talking, let's just say, for instance, Andrew Womack, right? Let's just use him as an example.
Sure.
If I'm doing a video on Andrew Womack that Saturday, I'll try to read a book by Andrew Womack. I'll try to listen to as many presentations by him as I can. I'll try to listen to responses by Justin Peters and others. I'll try to listen to, try to read some stuff that has been said in response to him by places like Gospel Coalition and things like that. And then I will go on, literally, I'll just go on Google Docs and I'll start typing my script up. All right, what's happening in polite society, and start up with the introduction, and then I'll go into the body and literally just type it out. And I will stop at, if I want it to be, I've got it down to almost clockwork. If I want it to be a 5-minute video, it's going to be 1,000 words. If I want it to be a 10-minute video, it's going to be 2,000 words. So it's just over time, you just start seeing things like that. Oh, this video had this many words, and therefore it was this long. And then I'll get in front of the microphone, usually Audacity. Use Audacity as a software and record it, and then that'll have the audio and aspect of it, and then I will go on Movavi. I'll bring in the audio, and I will look on Google or DuckDuckGo for videos, or not videos, for photos which align with that specific sentence. So if I say Andrew Womack was born in such and such city, I'll try to find a picture of that city so that it aligns with that statement. If I say Andrew Womack is the head of this ministry, then I'll try to find a photo of that ministry and align it with that statement. So that's kind of the editing process. That's how it goes. If we're talking about the older videos, the newer videos, I'm in front of the camera. So again, it's the same thing. It's going to sound really cheesy, but I write the script out and I stand in front of the camera. I sit in front of the camera. I turn the camera on, turn the lights on, and I'll have my smartphone and I'll literally have it on my lap, and I'll look down at the first line. I'll memorize it, and then I'll speak into the camera of that line.
Wow.
I'll go down and I'll edit the parts out where I'm looking at my smartphone, and so
that is so
nice
organized.
and so it looks crisp.
Very impressive. Yeah. I would never have guessed that you were reading it ever. Yep. That is really, really cool. What a neat idea to do that. Yeah, I need to think about something like that so I don't have so many squirrels.
Well, I mean, yeah, and then you just chop those parts out,
Yeah.
You just cut them out, and that's how it becomes like nice and crisp and easier for people to follow.
Neat. When you're doing these videos, and I'm excited to see the new style of things. I think that people are constantly interacting with like facial expressions, and so it's easier for them to see your heart in the matter whenever we see your face, that you're not angry at any of this stuff. You're actually just trying to teach and educate. And so, like you mentioned before, you can't see that in social media, and so it's helpful to see that your tone of voice and also your face in that. What is like the most difficult video for you to edit and put together, and is there like a few days worth of processes? Also, just another random one, have you ever struggled to find images that are like not copyrighted?
I think they're all copyrighted, but I think that it's just fair use. You can use them if it's fair use. Fair use is elastic, it's very subjective. Someone can sue you for using their photo, and you just take it down. That's what happens most of the time. So I don't use one. I just use whatever's available. I mean, it would be. I remember looking on there. There is a way you can look for non-copyrighted material, and your choices are just so limited
Right.
that you wouldn't really be able to find anything at all. And so far, no one's really complained because, like I said, it would be protected under fair use. Also,
Sure.
video clips. Video clips are probably copyrighted too. So if you show a video clip of Todd White or Stephen Furtick, that belongs to Elevation or Lifestyle. But again, it's fair use. You're trying to use it for an instructional purpose. So it's not hard to find them. I just try to find the ones that have the largest size. Otherwise, they end up, becoming distorted when you see them because of the pixels, so that they fit in. I know most people watch on smartphone anyway, but still, it could come out a little distorted if you don't pick one that's large in size. But no, it's not really difficult to find them unless it's like someone who's like really unpopular. Then they have very limited photos. Yeah, so you got to sometimes.
Oh yeah, or somebody who is no longer alive. That's a big problem.
That's a
for
tough
me.
one too. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the Spurgeon cartoons though. That's always fun. It's fun to find at least that. When you were getting started with all of this stuff, and you were right at the beginning, you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that you did some research. You researched, took some time to figure out like what other content creators were doing, even if they weren't Christians, which I think is really important. I really just want to quickly mention that if you're out there and you hear that and you think, well, that's terrible, why would you watch people who are not Christians and create this content to mimic that? The idea here is that we're trying to give people an alternative, right? So we want to produce good quality stuff for people to watch and to glorify God in the effort that we're doing. So the purpose behind looking into what other people are doing that works is to make sure that you're providing a good solid video for people, not to like mimic the world or be worldly, but to just get good ideas. And some of the content that people are putting out there is very impressive, considering the fact that they're just like people hanging out at their house and stuff. So when you were first getting started though, and you were researching all these things and putting it all together, what was encouraging to you at that time? And what do you have any encouragement for people who are maybe considering starting out and creating content on YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, it's easier than you think. When I started off, I just used my smartphone as the camera, and you can buy lights for pretty cheap. They don't really cost that much. So I had I just stood in front of like this black curtain if I was on screen, and just basically had my smartphone hooked up to the ring lights holder, and then I just made my presentation in front of the camera that way. Later on, I started to get better equipment, but that was later on. So it's not that difficult. Nick Neiman, I don't think he's a Christian. He's a secular guy, but he has an entire YouTube channel devoted to helping you use whatever you have available for yourself and the limited funds that you have in order to create good quality content. He explains how lighting works. He explains how recording works, how audio is so important, because even if your content is fantastic, if your audio is off, people are going to be less likely to listen to you. Audio is really important. They're more likely to watch your video if your audio is good and your visual is not that great than if your visual is great and your audio is not that good. So that's just like small little tips and things like that. If you are going to be a content creator on YouTube, and that's something that you want to do, one of the biggest things is consistency. Because there have been times when my schedule, it just kind of gets overwhelming, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to produce a video on Wednesday and Saturday, but I just push myself through it, make sure I get that Wednesday and Saturday video out. Sometimes they haven't been great. Sometimes I've been limited in the resources that were available to me, and so then some of the videos have turned out to be, this is early on, I'm talking about early on, now it's a little bit easier, but I just made sure that I got that video out, even if it wasn't the best possible video I could have done. It. So consistency is really important. And you have to have a goal in mind, like what is your goal in creating this channel? What is it that you want to communicate? If you talk about everything under the sun, that might be interesting to a specific audience. But if you have a more goal-oriented focus, like I'm going to be talking primarily about Word of Faith and NAR on this channel, then people know they're going to be tuning in and week out to know that that's going to be your area of focus. But even if you have like 5 or 6 different topics that you're going to focus on, still those 5 or 6 different topics, all of us are limited. There's no Christian theologian on the planet that knows it all. There are Christian apologists who know a whole lot about Eastern Orthodoxy that don't know much about Roman Catholicism, and vice versa. So we can't know it all. Just maybe try to limit yourself and don't overwhelm yourself, and be consistent, and you'll begin to see a good response.
Oh, that's really helpful. I think the overwhelming part is thinking that you need to address all of it. And so if you have that little niche, whatever it is, we're a body for a reason. We're a body of believers for a reason, and we need all of the moving parts. So I love to encourage people to just really get out there and just start doing something. And when I before I was podcasting or even doing video, I was just blogging, and I started the blog just to sort of be like a chronicle of how the Lord was sanctifying me. But I was very convicted by the book Susie Spurgeon, The Life and Legacy of Susie Spurgeon by Ray Rhodes, because it talks about how she lived her life and how she was, no matter how much pain she was in, she was constantly using her time for the glory of God. And when I watched that, I looked down at my phone and I saw like the little farming apps that I had that I would play, and all of the wasted time that I was spending, that I could be doing something else. And so I decided, okay, well, I don't know how to podcast or what a podcast is, but I've heard of that. I'm going to see if I can do that. And so I think the blessing that we have in this generation is the ability to do these things. So I'm excited to hear your encouragement for that. And hopefully that will encourage some listeners to start, even if you're just posting videos on Facebook or Instagram, that's still something that's going to be glorifying and edifying.
One thing I'll just add, though, that I think is of central importance if you are planning on doing a podcast or a YouTube channel or creating a YouTube channel or something like that, is make sure that you go to a local church and that you're under the authority of qualified male elders at that church. I mean, there are so many people on YouTube, and you can tell from their content that they don't regularly attend worship. They are not under the leadership of elders, and they're creating content, and you can see that their material is not that good because they are not obeying Christ's command to not neglect the gathering ourselves together and submit to those who labor over us day and night. And so if I was to say some wacky and weird stuff on my YouTube channel, believe me, my elders would have something to say about that. And people in my congregation would let my elders know about that. So I think that's a really important thing before you even delve into it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I have a couple of silly questions for you. I hate to transition to something silly, but I do have some silly questions for you. Before I ask you these silly questions, though, is there a way for our listeners to be praying for you, other than the fact that we're going to be praying because you have to read these books?
That's good. Yeah, just pray that I keep my cool in all the interactions that I have in the future, that I keep my anger under control, because that's been a problem for me in the past. That because I'm back at seminary now, so I'm at RTS Reformed Theological Seminary, taking an online class there, working on my Master of Arts in Biblical. Yeah, it's very exciting. So I pray for that goes well, and then that I'm successful in that. And for the church in general, the time that we're going through and all the difficulties that we're experiencing right now as a body with this current situation. So those would be essentially the things that I would ask for requests for.
Oh, that's great. We'll definitely be praying for you. That's really cool that you're in seminary, so you have a lot of books to read. Wow.
Yeah.
That's, at least you're balancing it. The wonky books with like lots and lots and lots and lots of theological books. Okay, so
try to keep it at a 9-to-1 ratio.
Well, theology courses will do that. I hear. I think Doreen Virtue was in theology. I can't remember the name of her program now, but she was also telling me about the amount of books that she was having to read. Yeah. And it was like, whoo, that's. I'm dyslexic, so it's really, unless it's an audio book, it's very difficult for me to understand what I'm actually reading. But silly questions. Okay. This is a very important one. I don't know if you know this, but there actually is a division in the church right now, and we're trying to help this, and we're trying to help people who are confused about what they're supposed to be eating. And so the division is between people who like pineapple on their pizza and people who know that that's sinful. So do you like pineapple on your pizza so that we know to be praying for you?
Now, let me see if I can remember this right. I think Ray Comfort is pro pineapple on the pizza, and Justin Peters was like, that's like a crime or something, right? That's just not right. When I was younger, I didn't mind it, but I would never have pineapple on my pizza now. I don't get it, I would have pineapple, I just wouldn't have it on top of cheese and bread.
Oh, yes. See, when you say it like that, hopefully people listening will know. Yes. Actually, I was going through some of the footage that I got with Phil Johnson to fill in some blooper reels for the Open Heart Conference that Brookwart's put on a couple of weeks ago. And I noticed, and you can't hear it because he kind of robot it out there a little bit right at the end. But Phil Johnson, I'm pretty sure, said that it was like the highest form of heresy to eat pineapple on pizza. So
Yeah, I think it's worse than Pelagianism.
I agree. I think that's very true. And I'm working on shirts right now for all of the listeners to have the anti-pineapple pizza one.
Yeah, we'll be praying for people who like pineapple pizza.
Thank you. My listeners are so sweet and they're so kind, but they're constantly sending me pictures of people eating pineapple on pizza, and that it's so they think they're so cute with that. And I'm like, wow, guys, come on. Stop tagging me in this nonsense. It's heresy. Okay. One last really silly question for you, just out of curiosity. Has there been a time while you were recording where you lost the footage or had something randomly terrible happen? Do you have anything like that will encourage those of us that constantly lose our important videos? That might be a funny story.
I'm not tech savvy. As you, I'm not even all that coordinated as dropping the camera demonstrated yesterday. I recorded my nephew was he's my cameraman now that I'm on screen. I recorded that into that recent video, the one that came out Wednesday. I recorded that entire video, did the editing and everything, uploaded it to YouTube. I didn't upload it publicly, but uploaded it privately. And then when I saw it, I was all blurry.
No.
It was all blurry. And so I had to go back, and my nephew, I got in front of the camera all over again. I did the entire video all over again. So that took up my Tuesday and my Wednesday evening. So, yeah.
After editing and everything, I hope that's encouraging to anybody listening that is struggling with technology, because we all struggle with it, and it is way more difficult than it needs to be. Thank you, brother, for that story. Yeah. And thank you for joining me on the program. Yeah, I'm so
much for
thankful.
having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. It is such a blessing to get to chat with you. Listeners, if you don't already know, because it is in the descriptions below, and you can check it out over there, down there, wherever it's at. It might be up there. I'm not really sure. But you can check out The Polite Leader. I have links to all of his stuff and his social media so that you can follow him there. You're on Instagram and Twitter, right?
I am.
What about Facebook? You don't like Facebook? Not a big fan?
There's just way too many. I don't have time to be on all of them. And so I don't even think I'm as active on Twitter as I am on YouTube and Instagram. I'm a little less active on Twitter. So
no, there's a lot of social medias. It's getting a little overwhelming. The Palar or Parler one is new, and my goodness, I joined Reddit for some reason, and yeah, there's a bunch of them. But anyways, brother, thank you for your time. I really, really appreciate all of the work that you're doing. We're going to be praying for you, and I am excited to see your podcast. Whenever it comes up, I will make sure to link to it. And yeah, thank you, brother. God bless you.
God bless you too. Thanks so much, Lauren.
Absolutely. All right, we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, Humblebees, that is it. That's all I have for you today. This was an exciting conversation. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I have a lot of fun talking to content creators, because it's always really nice to hear whenever they say that they've lost stuff as well, so that I know that I'm not the only weirdo that has constantly messed up with technology. And hopefully that'll be really encouraging to you if you're trying or considering or thinking about it. Also, if you are considering creating content, if you're wanting to do YouTube, if you're wanting to do a podcast, if you want to do a blog, if you already have those things and you would like for me to give you a shout out every Friday on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I go live and I do shout outs, recommendations. It's called the Live Mega List on Friday. So if you have something that you would like for me to shout out, you can let me know. Send it to me, send me links, let me know in the comments, and I will check it out. If it's biblically sound and solid, I'll make sure to give you a shout out. If you're a believer and you have a business and you would like for your business to be shout out, that's something that I really enjoy doing, because I love getting the chance to share these resources with listeners so that they can see that there is a large variety of resources out there. Maybe somebody who finds my voice annoying won't find your voice annoying. And so I can give them a link to whatever you're producing. And that way they might not want to listen to me, but they might really enjoy the way that you handle things. You have your own circle of influence, regardless of who you are or where you're at, that I can't reach, that Alan can't reach, that maybe people like Justin Peters can't reach. The circle of people around you that will listen to you is going to be different than the circle of people around me that's going to listen to me. And so that's why it's helpful to have your voice. Now, you may not be somebody who is at all interested in blogging, podcasting, or creating content. If that's the case, that's okay. We're a body of believers for a reason. You might just be one of those people that's really great at encouraging people who do that. Maybe you're one of those people that's really, really great at sharing things like that. We need everybody. Maybe you're one of those people that's really great at encouraging people who are discouraged about whatever it is that they're doing. Whatever it is that you're good at doing, maybe you're going to watch somebody's children while they create content, or help with editing. That's the thing that people could really use. Like you heard Alan say that he can't get to every comment because there's so many of them. There's lots of content creators out there that have that issue, that struggle with that. And so there are so many different ways that you can be a blessing to the body of believers, to the church, just simply by using technology for the glory of God. And so the reason why I love getting to talk to content creators, it has a lot to do with the fact that we have this technology that we can use, that we can create wonderful stuff for you guys to watch. That way that you don't have to go and watch something boring or cheesy or whatever it is. And you have that option available for you. And that way we are using our time wisely, and we are using the options that we have available for us. These platforms are available for free. And so while they're free, we might as well use them. Okay, I guess I should take that back. My podcasting isn't free, but YouTube is free. I do pay for the podcasting and the stuff that I use, the equipment. Okay, so it's not completely free, but YouTube is free. YouTube is free. And blogs are free unless you feel the need to pay for them. I don't pay for mine. But anyways, that's just a thing that I wanted to encourage you guys with. And hopefully this conversation with Alan is very encouraging to you guys. His top 10 worst teachers was so helpful. There's information in there, research that he did, reading the books, understanding where these people are coming from. It's very helpful to have those concise, shorter clips explaining these things. I can't wait for his podcast. That's going to be exciting. I love podcasts. I love the YouTube stuff. If you guys do happen to be listening to this on a podcast, then you probably already know that Tulips and Honey Hub is a channel of like-minded Reformed Baptist podcasters. And so I'm not the only one here on this channel. On Sunday, we have Pastor Edward from The Breath of Life. He's going to join us each Sunday with a sermon. And then on Monday, of course, if you're listening to this probably on Monday, maybe on Tuesday, could be Wednesday, I don't know, might even be Friday, I have no idea. But if you're listening to this, it dropped on Monday for sure. And then on Tuesdays, we have the Aquila and Priscilla Hour. Emily and Zach have been taking a break from podcasting. They will be back in September. I'm really excited to have them back here soon. We'll be having Brooke Bartz join us on the Tulips and Honey Hub, where we will have her podcasting, and her channel, her show is going to be called Open Hearts. We're really excited. So please be praying for her as she proceeds to get these things started and put it all together. It's a lot, and it can be a little overwhelming at the beginning. And then on Saturdays, we have Always Only with Emma, and that is our channel so far. We'll probably continue to add until there's not days left. And yeah, so there you go. That's it. That's this channel. That, if you are watching this on YouTube, makes no difference because there's only me on my YouTube channel. I just want to thank everybody for subscribing. You guys, if you don't already know, you can follow me on lots of different social medias. Over here, you can see all of them. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. If you are on Facebook and you want to have a whole lot of fun, you can join us on the Tulips and Honey Hub group. It's a private group, so you request to join and we'll let you in. Just we keep it private because that way, if you have prayer requests or questions that you want to ask that you don't really want other people to hear, that way you have a place where you can ask those questions or ask for prayer. And it's a great place if you have content that you create. We encourage the shameless plugging of anything that you have there in that group. We love that. Just like I love to do on Fridays, we're not in competition with one another just because you're a content creator and I'm a content creator. This is a body of believers. You have, like Alan said, you may have a topic that you cover that I can't cover, that I don't know anything about. So if you have stuff like that you want to share, that's a great place to do it. The group is a great place to do it. I also have Tulips and Honey Hub, the page on Facebook where you can, click like and follow and all that stuff, where you'll get like updates and stuff whenever stuff happens. And of course, I'm going live in those areas. So if you want to see the live mega list, you can see it on the Tulips and Honey Hub page and the Tulips and Honey Hub group, and my page at Lauren Herford, which you can see right there. Also on Twitter, I go live, and Instagram, I go live, and I'm live on YouTube. And technology is really cool because I just click one button and it sends me live to all those different places. It's so much fun. Anyways, that's it. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope that y'all are having a wonderful week. God bless each and every one of you. Bye, Humblebees.
Thanks for listening, Humblebees. This is Tulips and Honey. Over and out.
I think that diamond still needs a little more polish.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Humblebees. Welcome back to Tulips and Honey. This is I did that wrong. Wow. Starting off really poorly already. Okay, let's try that again. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Oh, great. Can you hear me? Oh, what's his name now? I can't remember. The younger dude that's always wearing like hip looking clothes and
Todd White. No, I mean, it's better just to physically be in North Dakota right now than it is to be in Los Angeles.
I think you'd probably get us really riled up if you actually arrest John MacArthur. Like
that would be something with it. Well, they did.
We might all go.
They did say they were going to turn the power off, and they didn't follow through on that. So now they're talking about the $1,000 daily fines in the arrest.
Yeah, I'll pay $1,000.
Yeah, people on Instagram were like, "How can I donate?"
Exactly. Yeah, right. Like you really want to see how. And I say this to a lot of business owners that I talk to. If they're reformed, they're like, "I'm kind of nervous to talk about, how I'm reformed because I don't want to offend people." And I'm like, "Listen, you have no idea how loyal we are. Okay, if you put it out there that you're reformed, I don't care what you're selling. I'm going to buy 3 of them. Okay, you just need to understand. But we got each other's back. We're a small community. We help each other. But yeah, it's my computer. It's not yours. So it notified me that it was my internet that was causing the problems, not yours. So, but you're back now. You're good. Okay, it looks like it's more stable now. Sorry about that scroll, but I'm really excited about that podcast. One of the things. Sorry.
I do that kind of stuff all the time. So.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
The blooper reel has to have stuff. So. I was recording the other day, and I can't remember who I was recording with, but it was somebody where they were like right in the middle of something very important and passionate. And I reached over to get my drink, and I knocked it over. And I have books all right here in case it's mentioned. I have like books that I like to grab and like support. And so I was like desperately trying to clean it while not making it look like I was doing anything because I didn't want this person to be in. It's totally fine, but I'm sorry. So many squirrels. Hopefully you guys will enjoy this, and hopefully you will join. Nope. Mm-mm. Let me take a deep breath real quick. I can't wait for his blog. Blessing, such a encouragement to me for the, why can't I use words?